The iPhone Air has been my favorite iPhone I've used in years, maybe a decade. The first highlight of using the iPhone Air is, of course, weight. Now, if you've subscribed to my videos or watched the channel for a while now, you'll know that my biggest complaint by far with larger phones is that most of the time they're just too damn heavy. This year's iPhone 17 Pro Max is 233 grams, and while that doesn't sound like a lot on paper, you don't realize how stupid heavy these phones are until you start using the iPhone Air. The iPhone Air weighs 165 grams, and it feels like a breath of fresh air in the smartphone market. Because finally, you can have a larger screen phone while keeping the weight down. And once you hold this in your hand, you don't want to put it down and pick up a heavier phone. It's why the iPhone Air, whenever I'm not reviewing or testing another device, this has been the phone that I've reached for as my go-to phone. But weight is only half the story. This is also Apple's thinnest phone to date, coming in at an incredible 5.64 millimeters. Now wait a minute, who cares about thinness? Yeah, you type in the comments, I read your mind, didn't I? Who cares about thinness? All I care about is battery life. What about that, YouTube man? Well, trust me, we will get there. I do think a lot of people miss when outright dismissing the phone's thinness is how much that thinness is working in conjunction with the lighter weight. Together, it delivers a using your phone experience that just feels better than every other slab phone that I've used. Why? Well, when you think about how you actually use a phone, you hold it in your hand, look at the screen, and scroll. And what Apple has done here is made that experience feel so much better. The other thing with this design that Apple just did an excellent job with is build quality. With the way they've engineered the battery and titanium frame, it's not going to bend or break in your pocket, even if you go caseless. Speaking of cases, the one I've mainly been using is Apple's Clear case, but it has an interesting omission. You'll notice there's actually no protection on the bottom. My guess for the reason why Apple designed it that way is that if you covered the bottom up completely, it would really dull the sensation that you get of just how thin this phone is when you're swiping with your thumb, and you just probably want to tear the entire case off at that point anyway. And this is actually the first iPhone that I found myself regularly going caseless with because of just how good this thin design feels in your hand without a case. Now, from an aesthetic standpoint, I also think that this does look pretty premium, especially with the polished titanium side rails. Though the colored models like my sky blue are really desaturated to the point where I forget I even have the sky blue color depending on the lighting conditions. Another highlight for me has been Ceramic Shield 2. This is Apple's latest generation of custom glass, and the reason that this is the first iPhone in years I haven't put a screen protector on. Not only is this new glass significantly more scratch resistant, Apple claims it's 3 times better than the previous material, and in tests it's been shown to resist light scratches up to level 7 on the Mohs scale versus 6 with the previous material. But Apple also went out of their way to point out that Ceramic Shield 2 uses a denser nanocrystal matrix that better helps prevent micro abrasions from accumulating over time, as well as a more durable oleophobic layer. Putting all of those upgrades together, it probably explains why 6 months later, I have yet to see any of those tiny little scratches in the glass that you can typically see in a really hard light. And if you are enjoying these insights, by the way, if you can do me a solid and hit that thumbs up button below, it really helps out the channel. And if you want to see more long-term reviews like this one, make sure you're subscribed. The other reason I skipped the screen protector on this phone is the new anti-reflective coating that comes with Ceramic Shield 2. We've seen this type of coating on other phones before, like the Ultra line from Samsung, but this is a first for Apple. It's been great, and I much prefer phone makers going this route than just touting how much brighter the display gets at peak, because a higher nit count at this point still isn't really doing anything to actually reduce the reflection showing up on the glass. Moving on, screen size is another highlight. While it's not quite as big as the Max line at 6.9 inches, 6.5 inches is actually a pretty decent size and feels great in my hand. And the display looks stunning. You get ProMotion with a 120Hz refresh rate, 3000 nits of peak brightness, and our website where we post updates to the tech that we cover, plus great content from around the web, looks great on it. All right, now let's talk software. And there were a few iOS features that have stood out during my 6-month period, like the new phone call features. You can now put calls on hold and the call screening feature where the iPhone will pick up and screen whoever is calling before your phone rings. But what really keeps me coming back to iOS day after day is the ecosystem as well as the performance of apps overall. The connection between iPhone and Mac with features like AirDrop, continuity camera, being able to just copy anything on my phone and paste it on my Mac, the way apps just work seamlessly between devices, there's still nothing integrated quite as deep as the iPhone and other Apple products, in my experience at least, with all of these little features you notice between Apple devices or just parts of iOS, like being able to just put any app you want on the lock screen as a shortcut. Those little things just kind of all add up over time. Something else that's added up over time is how good Apple's in-house modem has been. The C1X modem and the N1 chip in this phone have been excellent. And over my Wi-Fi 6E network, I noticed that this iPhone stays with the 6 GHz band much more consistently than my Android phones do, though it's important to note that the N1 chip here upgrades the Air to Wi-Fi 7. All right, let's talk about it. Battery life. Now, when this phone launched, Apple claimed all-day battery life, and for my light to moderate use, about 1 to 2.5 hours of screen time per day, plus 1 to 2 hours of background playback for music and podcasts, that's actually, it's been totally accurate in my case. I've been seeing anywhere from the low 40s down to maybe 15 to 20% at the end of a heavy use day, where screen time is closer to 4 or 5 hours, or on a day I've been doing a lot of shooting videos and photos. This is on the lower end for phones that I typically test, but I've only come close to running out once, and I was home and I could just easily plug it into charge or slap on the MagSafe battery pack. Speaking of which, that's actually another highlight. When you really need that extra battery, well, you can just bring the MagSafe battery with you, but on most days when I don't need that extra capacity, well, I don't have to carry it around with me, which, when you think about it, is exactly what you're doing most of the time with all of these flagship phones like the 17 Pro Max. After 6 months, I don't think I'd ever go back to carrying a heavier phone just for battery headroom I rarely need. Now, one thing that comes up a lot with iPhones is storage, especially photos and videos. That fills up fast, and you don't want to lose the data if something happens to your phone. And there's actually a better solution for this, a NAS, like the one from this video's sponsor, UGREEN, and their new DH4300 Plus. Think of it as your own personal cloud, except your data lives on hard drives in your home, linked together with RAID redundancy for protection if a drive fails, and it's more cost-efficient than paying for cloud storage month after month. The DH4300 Plus supports up to 120 terabytes across 4 bays, backs up your iPhone camera roll and your Mac's Time Machine automatically, and has AI photo organization that sorts by faces, places, and scenes, all locally on your network. You can also sync to Google Drive for extra backup protection, and setup just takes minutes using the app and NFC. No monthly fees and no storage limits. Grab it with 20% off for World Backup Day, link in the description. All right, now let's talk about things I haven't used much on this phone. First up is the selfie camera. Looking through my camera roll, I just don't actually take selfies that often, and when I do, it's usually just me. But the reason I'm bringing all of this up is the iPhone Air as well as the 17 and 17 Pro models, they all got upgraded to an 18 megapixel square sensor that can automatically crop and change the aspect ratio when more people enter the frame behind you. And importantly, when that happens, you don't have to change how you're holding the phone. Though note, selfies will still come out between 12 and 7 megapixels, depending on how tight that crop is. Another thing I haven't used all that much is actually the camera system in general. I've mainly used it for casual shooting and have been overall pleased with the photo and video quality that you get from this iPhone. It uses the same wide sensor found in the regular iPhone 17, which produces very good photos with crisp detail, colors that look right, not overly saturated, and while yes, Apple does still love pushing up the highlights, in my experience with this line of iPhones, they've actually been more restrained about it, where things don't look as blown out as they used to. Video quality also continues to just be excellent. Great clarity, great color. I really don't have much to complain about there. The one caveat is there's no ProRAW Max, Apple's own RAW format that preserves their computational photography while giving you a lot more latitude to tweak the images in post. And there's also no ProRes log video recording either. For my line of work, those features do absolutely matter, and yes, there are instances where I'd want every one of them to be available on the iPhone Air. But that's not the only reason this isn't my go-to camera for important events. Now, while iPhone cameras nowadays are very good, in my experience though, they still just can't compete in some areas with using dedicated cameras. For example, if you really care about image quality, you want ultra high-res images, or really important here, true shallow depth of field that you can only get with a real lens, you're still gonna want something like the Fujifilm camera I reviewed, or the Sony a7 Mark V that I'm currently reviewing, and if you want to see my review of it, by the way, make sure you're subscribed. Another part of the Air I didn't find myself using all that often was the camera control button. I use it occasionally just as a shortcut to jump into the camera app, but I can't stand when I accidentally press that thing, and the action button on the other hand, I use constantly. I have it mapped to toggle Do Not Disturb on and off, and it's become one of my favorite physical buttons on any phone. And then there's Apple Intelligence, which overall I haven't found very useful outside of notification summaries, which have been getting better, as well as priority notifications, which are great for when your phone is in a focus mode. You can still set focus modes to allow priority notifications where the phone will read the incoming notification and then use Intelligence to decide whether or not to still alert you. Now let's talk downsides. The most obvious one is there's no triple camera system like on the Pro iPhones. Now Apple says that you get 4 lenses in your pocket, but that's not really true. Like, I don't even know how they're getting to 4, frankly. I guess one of them, they're like portrait mode. It's like a portrait lens. It's not, but what you're really getting with a lot of those modes is just a sensor crop with some computation around it. The 2 lenses you get on this phone, in my book, are the 48 megapixel main camera and then the 18 megapixel selfie camera, and that's really it. And you don't even get a macro mode because of the missing ultra wide camera. Battery life is another downside worth calling out for heavier users. For me, it's been fine. It does dip lower than other phones, but I haven't constantly found myself running out of juice by the end of the day or even having to lean on low power mode. However, if you are a heavy user and you play power-hungry games like Pokemon Go, for example, that's going to chew through this battery a lot faster, so do keep that in mind. Now, do I think getting the MagSafe battery pack is worth it for the iPhone Air? In the course of 6 months, I haven't actually run into a situation where I would have needed to use it. However, if you're traveling a lot or in a situation where you may not necessarily have a place to charge, then yes, I would absolutely get it for that peace of mind. The Air is also slower at fast charging, only reaching a peak of 20 watts compared to 40 on the Pro and 17 models. The speaker is another downside. At high volume, you just get a lot of audible distortion that just doesn't sound very good compared to the 17 Pro Max's speakers. And there's only one speaker at the ear, there's no bottom firing speaker. It's not a deal breaker for me, but I could see how it could be for some. Another downside involves iOS 26. The new liquid glass redesign has introduced a few rough edges, like the tabs in Safari now take one more tap to access than before, for example, and while the new design overall has some areas that I genuinely think look really nice and pretty, like the way timers display on the lock screen where you see this cool light refraction, there are plenty of rough spots where elements are just harder to see, especially for users who have a harder time looking at things on their screen to begin with. But the biggest systematic downside to iOS, and this applies to every iPhone, not just the iPhone Air, is that everything still has to be downloaded via the App Store. You just don't get the software freedom that you do on a Mac. And that's actually one of the reasons I keep coming back to the Mac as the ultimate creative device, not iPads or iPhones. That flexibility you get of being able to just download things from the web is irreplaceable. Like, imagine vibe coding an app for your iPhone that you could just use immediately, which I guess you could technically do with test flight, but that still involves needing to use Apple's tools to do, where the Python scripts that I've vibe coded on my Mac, they don't involve any App Store or test development software. All right, now one last small downside worth mentioning is that this phone does run warmer than some of my previous iPhones, mainly because they put all that computation and chips and everything up at this top plateau, so when you're doing something really intensive, you're gonna feel that part of the phone heat up. It still has the Pro chip, but sustained performance, especially in games, isn't quite on the level of the 17 Pro and Pro Max, which benefit from better thermal management thanks to its vapor chamber and aluminum chassis. So, do I recommend the iPhone Air? 100% yes. This is the iPhone when people ask that I have been recommending the most throughout the year, though I will say I haven't sold many of them. I think most people see that single camera on the back, get nervous, and end up buying the Pro model or the regular 17. Which is wild because the only extra camera that you get on that one is the ultra-wide, which is kind of useless in my opinion, but it's not actually useless. It's just, I think the telephoto is way more useful than an ultra-wide, and you only get the telephoto on the Pro. Look, if you're doing a lot of video work like I am, or you're really into photography and want those Pro tools or extra camera lenses, yes, I'd still point you toward the Pro. But if the photos you take are mostly casual, and especially if you have a dedicated camera for the important family events or trips you go on, do your hand a favor, save the weight, and I would absolutely go with the iPhone Air. And yes, overall, I think it is worth the price that Apple is charging for it. Speaking of which, you can check current prices on the Air, see links to multiple retailers, and find all of the other products featured in this video by clicking the product links in the description and pinned comment. And if you ever want to keep an eye out for deals on Apple products in general, head over to our shop page, 6monthslater.net/shop, and simply search Apple Deals. That'll pull up all of the Apple products that we recommend and have noticed have recently gone on sale. So those are all of my thoughts on the iPhone Air, and let me know what you think of it in the comments, whether you'd go for it or why you would decide to go with a different phone. Now, for more of my thoughts on how it compares to the iPhone 17 Pro Max, you can get to that video by clicking here, and click here for more videos on Apple products in general. Now, make sure you follow us at 6monthslater.net for updates on all of the tech that we cover. For 6 Months Later, I'm Josh Tedder, and if you made it all the way to the end here, let me know in the comments by commenting Sky Blue.